everyone. Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, Rush Nation, what's happening? Oh my goodness, do we have a show for you today? We've got a guest. Last week, Murph promised guest. If you're watching on the visuals or going to watch this later, you can see who it is. Before we get to the guest, big man, how are you? The draft's done. Tell me you've got fantasy draft fatigue already, because I haven't. I've only done 2, and I already hate it.
No fantasy draft fatigue. It's phenomenal. It's great. This is the time. This is what we live for, right? And it's great to now have random names, and all of a sudden, like, these people are now NFL players. The only thing that's really sad is all the people that bought the Shedeur Sanders hype and were drafting him like really high in drafts like a week ago, thinking he's going to be like a first-round talent and an elite fantasy player. And it's like, I don't get to enjoy people making that mistake anymore. That's the only sadness I truly have. The rest of it is kind of there. But I love it.
We can talk about my hatred for drafting just after the NFL draft at another point, because we do have a guest. It wouldn't be rookie season without bringing back the godfather of 5 Yard Dynasty, DLF senior contributor, I hate that word, and Fantasy Sanctuary co-founder is Rich Cooling, everybody. Rich, welcome back to the building. How are you, my man?
No, thank you very much. Yeah, to join you, I hate that word as well. I've campaigned to try and get rid of it, but can't. But yeah, I'm very good. Thank you very much. Absolutely love coming on and getting to chat with you guys. It's always a pleasure, and love coming back into the 5 Yard family as such.
Man, it's been too long. It's been too long since we've all been together. This is great to be here and celebrate. And you've had quite a week, haven't you? With Sunday, and then you're having a big day today. So take a moment to talk about what you've been up to, what today means for you especially.
Yeah, deciding to run a marathon the day after the draft when you're trying to release a rookie guide is not advisable. So I'd recommend people don't do that. But yeah, I guess the big thing is the rookie guide, which dropped today. Really pleased with that. So that's not 90 film-based profiles of all rookies, and then rookie model ranks, all the stuff. I throw a lot of pidgin English into a Google Doc, and then Tom does some incredible work making it readable, legible, grammatically correct, and makes it look good. So that dropped today, which was it's a nice thing to get off your back, because it's very much a labor of love. I love doing it, but it's a big beast.
I hear you. I haven't read the updated guide today, but I obviously have the pre-draft version, and I messaged you privately that for me, is this the 3rd year of the guide or the 4th year? I lose count.
Third year.
I thought it was 3rd. I thought maybe I better hedge. This for me is the best one yet. I think you can see the growth over the years, but this one just has the for me the right level of detail. And I've always valued your opinion on how you value and view players and the way that they go. And I might not always agree, but you always admire and appreciate people's process. And I think this time round, you've really nailed the balance between not just showcasing the process, but really explaining what separates each of these players, even when there's really fine margins between quite a few of these players. So if you're not part of the Fantasy Sanctuary community, first of all, you should be, and you should definitely sign up. And if you sign up for the membership, you get the guide for free. So be part of that and enjoy their content. But if not, definitely go, and we'll put a link into the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, go get a copy, because it is must read, especially if you're doing your drafts and you're going to need it as a guide. I use it. I know lots of people that use it. It's also good because I draft with lots of people that use it. So it's also good to know you can work out who's following it to the letter as well. So no, kudos to you, man. It's absolutely awesome.
I really appreciate that. Really appreciate your kind words. Thanks, bud.
It's one of those things at the moment I'm struggling with is getting my head round the rookie rankings that people have. And I couldn't think of two of the people I ask the most questions about rookies to be on the same show. So this is going to be, for me, a sort of sit back and enjoy moment. I'll just gently rudder it here and there, but it's basically going to be, if you're watching visually as well, this is perfect because it's going to be a game of Pong with me in the middle. I think I'm in the middle. I am on my screen. So yeah, it's going to be a rookie game of Pong, essentially bouncing between Murph and Rich and just getting all the good stuff from there. And then I'm just going to sit here and think, well, that's great. I now know it all. Rich, the class as a whole, what did you think of it?
It's hard to sum everything up. I think it's good, I would say. I don't think it's great. I think if we take it positionally, I think quarterback is bad. Let's just start there. I think it's a bad quarterback class. I think running back has got an elite top end, a kind of a bloated middle, shall we say, of a lot of guys that I think could be good, but aren't necessarily definitely going to be good. I think wide receiver is good and deep, but it lacks that sort of. Every class we sort of get one or two like definite generational like studs, and this just feels like it's lacking that. And then tight end, I think, is just a fantastic tight end class. So yeah, I think it's good, solid. You know, we've had better, we've had worse, but it definitely sits in the middle.
Well, I tend to agree with that. Although the only thing I would say is I actually probably am a little bit more bullish on the wide receiver class at the top end than perhaps I was pre-draft. Just seeing where some of these players have gone. First of all, I don't think I expected to see quite as many go in the first round. I think that was my first thought. I know that there were mocks suggesting there could be 4 going in the first round. I didn't believe it. I really thought it would be 2, possibly 1 late. So to see 4 was really interesting. And then also, I think where some of these folks have landed in the second round, it's made it definitely a lot more interesting than I think if it had been probably as projected, where a lot of these guys might have fallen to the third round, and I would have been a little bit more pessimistic because where they've landed as well, there's real scheme fits and talent fits and needs. So it was kind of really interesting. So I agree with you that I think that probably maybe I'm a bit overhyped from it, but I actually think there's the potential that some of these guys could really come out and tear it up because of where they've landed and the draft capital put into them that perhaps I wasn't expecting. Did you think the same, or in slightly
I think there's a few. I think there's a couple of guys that got good draft capital that I was lower than consensus on as prospects. So I think, you know, the likes of Matthew Golden getting a first round pick doesn't really do much for me because I didn't like him as a player. I'm still not convinced that Travis Hunter is going to be a 100% snap share guy. If you could sit here and guarantee that Travis Hunter is a 100% snap share wide receiver, I think my opinion on the wide receiver class changes because I think he is that true superstar, could be a top 6 dynasty wide receiver type prospect. But I think he's probably the only one in this class. And I think that's where I'm sort of perhaps slightly down on this class because I like Ted McMillan. I think he's good. But I think that's it. His ceiling is like rock solid wide receiver 2-3 for the next 6, 7, 8 years, rather than I don't think he'll ever be a top 12 dynasty wide receiver.
Especially with where he's landed.
Yeah.
that really killed any enthusiasm. I thought if he lands somewhere great, there's a chance. But yeah, I kind of with you on Tet. I can share something I knew before the draft, which is irrelevant now because I can share it, that I was speaking to someone who is connected to the Cleveland Browns organization, and had they drafted Travis Hunter, which was the plan, but the capital was too much to turn down. The plan was for him to play like not 100%, but 90% snaps, and he would have seen up to, but no more than a third of CB snaps. So yeah. I wonder if the Jags have a similar vein and role in mind than what Cleveland did, because that's what Cleveland were planning, was no more than a third of snaps at DB and 90% at least at wide receiver.
And that's what the coach speak after the draft has been, is that he's going to major in, wide receiver minor as a DB.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced, because, the injury rate in the NFL is 100%, and that's just playing one side of the ball. Even if he is going to play, let's say 90% of snaps on offense, 30% of snaps on defense, I still need to see him play that for an 18-game season, because we're going to get there very soon. And I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, that's fair, for sure.
We do have a question on the screen, Murph, but as I'm using my phone, and with three of us, it's very small. So it's from Pitsy, but that's all I got.
Yeah, so Pitsy says, I know Rich doesn't always care too much about landing spot with draft capital, but is there anyone that you were high on that the landing spot has ruined them for you?
That's a tough one. I can flip the question and say I was high on Jalen Royals. He obviously fell to day 3, which is normally a no for me in terms of that kind of ends any interest. But the fact he's landed with the Chiefs, that sparked a bit of interest there potentially. I've said Matthew Golden I wasn't particularly high on as a prospect, but him landing with the Packers, where we've got 500 different receiving weapons and tight ends that are going to try and catch passes, I think is probably not a good thing. So I guess that's probably the one that I'm a little bit nervous on.
Yeah, that's fair. Mine would be Ted McMillan. I just think for me, I think you're going to go and send him to a really basic offense with Dave Canales, with a quarterback in Bryce Young who is playing for his job, with an organization that has been notoriously bad for a decade, and continually, and this ownership has not created a pathway to success. And I'm being polite, I think, with that. That concerns me massively. I just think for me, you can get really talented players landed with bad organizations and perform, but it takes a lot for that to happen. And they are outliers as opposed to the norm. And then it really is the talent that absolutely propels them, as we saw last year with the Giants, right? That's not always something that talent is not always enough to overcome terrible situation that continues to be in a terrible situation year after year after year after year. So I think for me, Ted McMillan is that guy. I think not that for me, I think I look to him probably as the wide receiver 2 in this class. And I have given him a minor downgrade because of where he's landed. And I look at where some other players have gone and think they will have an opportunity to outperform him, because I'm with Rich. I think he's a wide receiver 2 consistent player. I think for me, you're going to see probably not in terms of playing style, but in terms of statistical numbers, T. Higgins 2.0. I think you're going to see a nice baseline of consistency. Player you probably want on your team, but it's going to be well over the draft capital, the way you'll never own him. I think that's kind of how I view Ted McMillan now.
Ouch. Rich, earlier on, Murph said he thinks this is your best iteration of your draft guide. Is there anything you've changed the process on from last year to this year to potentially make it better? And I say that in quotes because everybody wants it to be better all the time, but Murph said it was better. So is there anything that you think you've changed to make it better this year?
I think that there's a few little tweaks. I mean, whenever you're watching film, I think every bit of film, every thing you're watching, you're always learning, you're always improving. So I think every time you're watching anyone's tape, hopefully the next play you watch, you're better at than watching the last guy. So I think that definitely. I tweaked the rookie models slightly, just subtle differences. I think, that's something that I'm always testing. I'm always looking to improve. One of the things I removed weight adjusted speed score out of my running back model. I think the last few draft classes have shown, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, perhaps we overweight the kind of the 40-yard dash, and testing it, back that up slightly. But yeah, just, refined the product, I guess, focused a little bit more. So I do a thing called a riskometer, which is basically a scale of 0 to 10 of how risky a player is. And the idea is that, 0 is essentially out the league, and 10 is, fantasy god in terms of, league winning player. And it's to try and give an idea of what I think the range of outcomes is for a player. So, you could take a player that's a 7 to 8 because he's a solid, reliable option, but actually the next guy you might have ranked below him, but he could be a 4 to a 9. So he could end up being better, he could end up being worse, but he's got a much wider range of outcomes. So I spent a little bit of time really focusing in on that this year, which is something I really enjoy, and something that I think is quite unique perhaps to kind of how I view and how I approach the rankings and the values and that side of things.
Nice. Sounds decent. I like a riskometer. Anything with an ometer is always better than just an upward without. You said the quarterback class was bad. It's basically Cam Ward or bust, right?
Yeah, I think it's, Cam Ward to me is a good prospect. Something I've started doing this year is that I've started in my rankings, I'm giving guys a star rating. So much like, high school prospects get a star rating. This is to show, I guess, across draft classes where I'm at with players. So although Cam Ward's my QB1, how does that compare to previous classes? And he's only a 4-star. So I'm sort of saying he's a good, very good prospect, but he's not that kind of superstar. I've then not got any 3-star guys. But there's sort of 3, to me, question marks who I think have got some upside. I'm intrigued in at cost of sort of mid to late second rounders, but certainly not getting anywhere near my first round. And that's Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, and Jalen Milroy.
Okay. Murph, any rebuttal on those 3? Obviously, with Cam Ward in Superflex and stuff is going to be locked in as a first-round prospect because he is the only one. So potentially his value is even higher because he's the only quarterback that's potentially startable this year. But other than Cam Ward, what's your feelings on the other 3?
Well, I think just because he's the only one, that's where you can get into trouble. And I think Rich will agree with this with requirements, right? If you need a quarterback and you're trading up and trading the farm for Cam Ward, I think you're going to be disappointed. I think you're looking at a guy. I think for me, you're looking at a 15th best fantasy quarterback in the league performance. That's kind of where it wouldn't shock me if he snuck in a 12, like 12 to 15 for me feels his ceiling range. I can't see anything higher than that for him. And I think if you're going to cash the farm to go and trade up for him, I think you're going to be severely disappointed. That's not to say he's not a good player. That's not to say that he's not going to improve Tennessee. That's not even to say that he's not fantasy relevant. But I think if you shoehorn your dynasty build on that specific need and you overpay to compensate for that, I think you're going to be severely disappointed. And I think it's going to cost you your future year's builds. So I think if you're sitting there in sort of the mid first and Cam Ward falls for you and it's a position of need and you're not paying anything else to get him, I can understand it more. But I certainly wouldn't be giving up additional assets to get up to go and get Cam Ward because he is the only one. I am in slight disagreement with Rich on Jackson. Well, not disagreement. I have reservations on Jackson Dart quite severely. I said this on our Patreon, and the Patreon episode I've released will come out next week, so you'll hear it more there. But for me, with the front office and coach being on the hot seat, there is every chance that Jackson Dart never plays for the New York Giants. And I think that you've got to be really careful. I've seen rookie drafts where Jackson Dart's going in the first round in Superflex drafts, and I'm like, you can't do it. You can't do it. There is so much risk with him because if they get rid of Joe Schoen and they get rid of Brian DeBall, the new ownership and the new GM and coach have got absolutely zero stock in Jackson Dart, and they can go again next year and go and draft someone else. So I think you've got to be really careful. As you say, if he's mid-second, late second, yeah, worth a punt, absolutely. But I think you've got to be really careful. The name I would add, only because of right now, is Will Howard. And I think you've got to add the question mark to him now, because right now he's probably QB1 of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I haven't started opening day as it stands, but I also think that the Steelers have a plan. So I think that there is a plan. They're going to bring someone else in. But I think right now, if he's there in the start of the third round, I'm probably taking a chance on Will Howard, because if the plan doesn't come to fruition, you have got a starting quarterback in the third round of a rookie draft. And it's his to lose then. Not that I think he's especially brilliant, but I do think that he's landed into a weird situation where that's a winnable job. And I think if you get him at a very low price, he becomes really, really interesting, even with a 6th round draft grade on him.
See, so Rush Nation, this is why you need to watch, because Rich smiled like a Cheshire cat when Murph brought up Will Howard. Rich, Will Howard, thoughts, please.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with somebody asking me about Will Howard today, and I went in quite hot. So that was why I was smiling. I really disagree with Murph. I think that drafting Will Howard is a wasted draft pick, because I think that he's a career backup. Like, I don't think he's anything more than that. And I think that we all know that the Steelers have got another answer. Like, there's enough options out there, whether that's trading for Kirk Cousins, whether that's signing Aaron Rodgers, whether that's potentially trading for Derek Carr. Like, there is 0% chance for me that they're starting Will Howard this year. And I think that they've drafted him to be a career backup. And yeah, I get Murph's point, and I do see the chance of, if there is a world where he could, in theory, start, and if you do get a starting quarterback in the third round, that's absolutely profit. But to me, I would rather go and take a flyer on a running back, a wide receiver, one of these, depth tight end options, or, one of the Cleveland Browns too, because I think those two have got a better chance for me of starting this year than I believe Will Howard.
See, that's funny, because I disagree. Only because I think that both of those two are. I think it's only if Flacco gets injured or you get the dead rubbers at the end of the season. But I think with 2 draft picks, the Cleveland Browns are going to take a quarterback next year. And I think if you're going for a Shadur or a Dylan Gabriel,
Murph's mic's unplugged, so I can quickly jump in.
Mike.
I think that, to me, the way the Browns season's going to go, I think we already know the Browns are going to be rubbish.
I can't hear anything.
I think that the Browns are going to be terrible. So Flacco's probably going to be done after week 4 or 5, when there's nothing left to play for. They're 0-4 or whatever. And Kevin Stefanski's going to say, why not give one of these rookies a chance? Throw him in, because it's found money. If one of them turns into a franchise quarterback, it's found money. If not, never mind. You spent a third and a 5th round pick. There's no cost. So I don't think either of them are necessarily going to be the franchise quarterback. But I think for the cost to acquire and for the chance that they could be, I'd rather draft one of those guys.
I'm genuinely shocked they didn't take Jalen Milroe. I'm genuinely, like, that to me, when that didn't happen, felt very bizarre, because it kind of was all set up for him to go there. For me, ex-coach is there. They're looking for people in there to do something a bit different. They love the ground game. They've got a person they could scheme design runs to. It felt very, I don't know. That to me is almost the biggest knock on Jalen Milroe, is that his former coach didn't have enough of a voice to take him. But I'm intrigued with Milroe. I actually have him as QB2 in this class now, because I think that with the contract situation with Darnold and the character that he has, if he can develop with that rushing floor, he's going to be the most interesting of these question mark quarterbacks, I think, for upside than the rest.
Yeah, I think, the dream scenario is absolutely there. I just think that, for me, I'd have Dart and Shuck ahead of him, because I think they're both going to start this year. And I think that Milroe is, whilst theoretically the fantasy ceiling is sky high. It's, it is theoretical. I think he's potentially going to be more kind of Taysom Hill like than perhaps starting quarterback.
Yeah, I like it. To be honest, I wouldn't have my master any of these guys. I think this is I think the NFL told you a year ago that they were out on this draft class with all the trade ups, with all the quarterbacks that went in round one. They told you what they thought of this draft class 12 months ago, and so I think we wait till next year. It's definitely fascinating. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but. I think if you're relying on anyone in this draft to turn your fantasy fortunes around the quarterback position, strap in for 2026. I think is probably the best thing to do.
The Rush Nation faithful are out in full force tonight. Stormo's come in saying this is an awful cap. Disagree, but that's fair enough. Do you know why I'm wearing this? Because we're talking about elite running backs next. Ashton Jeanty. Rich, talk to me.
Superstar, like straight up. 99th percentile prospect in my model, does some absolutely ridiculous things. I've never seen a player with his combination of breaking tackle ability and pass catching nous. This is a guy that had one of the most fantastic and phenomenal backstories. If you want to go and read about him, I recommend it. This is a guy that was playing football in Italy on military bases, and they were having to drive overnight to go and play teams in Berlin because there was no local teams to play. Like it's awesome. But yeah, truly elite. I think what he does is rare. To give you an idea, my rookie model, so in the last 10 years, prospects who are above the 95th percentile in their first 3 seasons have averaged a best season of 21.44 points per game. So that's where Ashton Jeanty sits. We're talking about guys, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Todd Gurley, Bijan Robinson. Like it's generational wealth and quality that he sits in. And I'm incredibly excited. The only slight downside is that I think the Raiders' offensive line is bad, and I think everybody keeps saying that it's good, and I can't quite get my head around it. I think they've got a decent tackle. I think they've got a potential center, and I think there's 3 bad offensive linemen across the board apart from that. But I think he's going to get force-fed the ball. I think he's going to be used enough in the receiving game that I think he could be an absolute superstar.
Music to my ears there. Murph, are you locked in now with him as your top running back in this class? After we spoke just before the draft, you weren't necessarily sure.
No, I mean, look, I'm different, right? I'm always going to be a little bit different. He's up there, of course he is. I do have Hampton slightly higher. I think it's a preference of running style and ability. And for me, the thing I always worry about with running backs, and maybe this is me overweighing something, but we've seen a trend on tread and tires. And I think when you see the amount of workload he went through last year in particular, and what he has done in college, that's a lot. It's a lot of what he has done. And I think there is a lot of tread on those tires. And that is something that doesn't always correlate well. Now, I think if there's any player that's going to overcome that, is Ashton Jeanty. I'm not saying he's washed. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just, for me, like players that are a little bit fresher, that have managed to deliver. Also, the league type is another thing for me. I always look at where players come from, and that's another part. But, I mean, we're splitting hairs. I'm not going to sit here and die on a hill that I think Hampton is, like, infinitely a better back than Jeanty. I think they are, for me, right there with each other. You can flip it either way for me. I know people have a distinct gap between the two, and that's fine. I think Jeanty's going to be excellent. I'm with Rich. I'm worried about the offensive line quite significantly. I am worried about, as well, with a Pete Carroll offense, the amount of offensive plays they run. I think it's going to be slow. I think they're going to only run, 50, 55 plays a game. Whereas I'd like to have seen him go to a more high-tempo offense that would perhaps go 70 plays, 75 plays a game, where he would therefore get on the ball more. I also worry if they're just in this sort of rebuild mode, do they want to absolutely run Ginty to the ground in his rookie year, or are they going to manage him? Like, I'm really keen to see what his usage is going to be. Now, they've got Mostert there. I would like really to see them run quite a bit of Mostert year one and really have like this two-form package. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I'd like for Ginty's longevity in this league. But I think if they come straight out of the chute and they give Ashton Ginty the ball 350 times next year, I actually think that's going to hurt him long-term in a season that they're not going to compete. So I think for me, I'd like to see the usage. I'd like to see what happens. But for me, I think Hampton, the thing I was worried about with Hampton was draft capital, landing spot, and they tick both boxes. I'm not worried about him blowing Najee Harris out of the water. I think Najee Harris is unfortunately one of the biggest overrated running backs in the league. I think he'll earn his role, but I think as well, I look at what Hampton can do, and I think he's got a lot of special traits in terms of generating yards and in a better offense with a better offensive line, with a better quarterback behind him, better offensive play caller as well. I just think that they are, for me, I think he's going to have more opportunity. The way I would also call it is, I would really like to see Hampton, for Ginty's long term, I would like to see Hampton actually out-touch Ginty year one. I think if Ginty, like I said, comes out and does it all, 350, 400 touches, I reckon that does cook him going forward. That's my concern. I'd like to see some restraint from the Raiders this year. Get him to 300 touches, and then I think he can really cook a year 2, year 3 with better players and better talent around him.
Rich, you may reply if you so wish. We talked about Ginty being elite in your model. Is there anybody else who you have close to Ashton Ginty?
Yeah, so Hampton's a 92nd percentile, so in that very, very good tier, but not quite in the kind of elite tier. I think I hear what Murph's saying. I think I've done studies on this, and there's actually negative correlation between rushing volume in college and injuries in the NFL. So the players that carry a workload in college are less likely to get injured in the NFL. So the volume of touches and things like that doesn't concern me at all. I think Hampton's a very good prospect. I think my challenge is that I don't think he's anywhere near the receiver Ginty is. And, a reception is, 2.8 times, a target is 2.8 times more value than a rushing attempt. I think Hampton's going to be capped at like 30, 40 targets a year, whereas I could see, Ginty's probably not going to be Christian McCaffrey kind of 100 target level, but we could see early Alvin Kamara. What was it, four years in a row where he saw 81 targets or something, wasn't it, to start his year? I feel like that's going to be where Ginty could be consistently, and Genty's got the ability to flex out wide and play as a receiver if the Raiders move into empty sets. I think Hampton is very good, but I just don't think he's got that elite trait that Genty's got, and I think Genty's got potentially 2 in terms of his ability to break tackles and that receiving stuff. Ginty, this is a guy who was in high school, was a wide receiver and is now a running back kind of thing. Like that's how good he is as a receiver.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually do have Hampton I've just pulled up my projections. I do have Hampton getting 50 targets this year. I think he's probably slightly underrated. He did see upticks in each of his college years. But yeah, he's not going to get the volume that Ginty has for sure. Like, I have Ginty getting 70 targets this year. I think that's where I kind of see him. I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but that's about where my head's at.
I do have one question for you both about Ginty. So Ashton Ginty last year led all of college football in rushing yards. Can either of you tell me who was number 2 in rushing yards in college last year?
Oh,
it was Ashton Ginty after contact.
Wow.
He had more yards after contact than any other running back in all of college last year.
Yeah, it's mad. Yeah, I mean, phenomenal player. I think, like I said, for me, I just want to see some restraint from the Raiders. I've actually projected him to have some restraint this year, which is but I just don't want to see him get over 300 touches. So if the Raiders use him to the numbers I've got, which is at, you're not going to believe this, I have him at 299 touches. Like, if they nail that, 299 touches, like, I think he could dominate for the next 3 to 5 years. But I think there is something to, if he's overplayed, I am concerned that it will wear thin quick.
Another comment about the hat. I mean, what is it? Come after Stocks Day. I'm just, it's cardinal sin for a Broncos fan. This is not the first time you have watched this show, Harry. How many different teams have I worn? I have an extensive hat collection. In fact, name one.
Bucks, though.
Probably.
No. You need the Rob Lowe. You need the Rob Lowe NFL hat, and then you can just, sit on the fence.
Yeah, never worn a Bucks hat.
I don't have one. It's maybe there's the cardinal sin of the podcast, not owning a Bucks hat. I've got a Jets one though, Rich. Starting running backs. Anybody else that you are really high on this year?
Yeah, I think Trevion Henderson, I think, is going to be good. I think Quinton Judkins is. I love the kind of Thunder Lightning that the Browns have done. I've never seen it in a single draft class where teams have taken Thunder and Lightning in the same class, where they added Dylan Sampson on day 3. RJ Harvey he's just fun to watch. Like, there's some holes in the model, there's some holes in the prospect profile. Yes, I don't think he should have gone at the back end of round 2. He's probably overdrafted. I'm not convinced he can carry, a full workload, but he's just fun to watch. And if we're talking range of outcomes, his is sky high. And then I've been low on Caleb Johnson all through the process and the prospect. And I said, look, Caleb Johnson is a competent back. I have issues with, I think he's a zone-only fit. I have issues with him as a pass catcher. I'm not convinced he's going to be able to live in the NFL. And then he gets drafted by the Steelers, where they ran the third most zone concepts last year. 72% of their runs were zone. And they've got a natural pass catcher in Jalen Warren. It's like, okay, maybe I'm now interested in getting Caleb Johnson after being out on him all year. And then the last guy I'd throw out is Cam Scatterbo, who, I heard someone say, you can be slow, you can be white, but you can't be both. And it's like, okay, maybe that's the issue there, but he has the potential to take over that Giants backfield. Second last year in college in terms of missed tackles forced after Ashton Genty. He is a bruising back that doesn't perhaps have the size. Maybe he's about 10, 15 pounds light of his playing style, if that makes sense. He runs like a 250-pound back and he's like 220. But great receiver and could absolutely take over that backfield as well. So there's, another 5 options after the top 2, which shows to the potential depth of this running back class.
Yeah, I got the same list. I have Tootin in there as well. He's the other guy. And again, I think I would have been out on him if you told me he was a day 3 pick, I'd have been like, okay. And then I see he lands up high day 3, and he lands in Jacksonville, where we know they're going to move on from Travis Etienne. And there's an immediate opportunity for him to walk in with a pass catching role, with everything on the table there. He could not have landed in a better place for him, but I thought I like the skill set and match, given what I've seen from Liam Cohen at the Bucks and knowing what he does with his running backs, and he needs guys with pace, and especially ones that can break contact. That is an amazing fit. Like, without investing at the top of the board, that's as good a fit I think I could find for player and scheme and coach for the running back position. So I think he's one I'm really interested in, given watching a lot of Liam Cohen's offense and knowing what he did with turning the worst running game from the last 5 seasons in the NFL into one of the better ones. So I think it's a really good landing spot and a really intriguing fit. But I'm with you on all the other guys, like to the bottom of that list. But he's one I would add to it because of where he is and knowing what the coach can do with that scheme.
Yeah, I mean, he's next in my ranks. I've got him in a tier on his own. I think, I'm always going to lean towards age-adjusted production. That's what a lot of my model is, and he basically just didn't produce in college. This is one of the most athletic guys we've seen at the combine. He's got absolutely loads of potential, but to me, he's slightly more theoretical than definitive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. He really is. I just think, again, I think if he'd landed somewhere else, I'd be less interested. But because of having, I feel like I know Liam Cohen's scheme, having really watched that in real time and knowing what he does with running backs, and then you give him a piece like that, it's really. And then you look at the fact they're going to let Travis go, and I think there's so much there for him to eat up and get a good advantage and a good opportunity too. So I think he's a good one to keep an eye on in that list. But with you on all the others as well. I think it's a very similar list. It's chalky, but RJ Harvey was the big surprise. I actually can't think of a bigger winner from a fantasy perspective, like in terms of unexpected players to jump as high with that draft capital and landing spot and think, okay, that's a player you got to take more notice of now than, because I was quite low on him as well. I saw the flaws, and then I'm like, well, okay, he's gone to a Sean Payton offense. He's a fun player. There's not a lot in front of him. There's every opportunity. Like, you've got to pay more attention to him now, I think, than I was probably expecting to.
Yeah, I'm a bit annoyed that I was looking forward to getting some fun dart throw territory and some shares in the mid-second. Yeah. I've seen him go. I've seen him go 104 in a draft. I've seen him go mid-first. Like, I'm
not that high.
It's expensive for me now, so I'm probably not going to end up with very many RJ Harvey shares, which is a shame because, as I said, he's really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's fair.
We do have a comment, Murph, but again, you're going to have to read it.
I think I can see Henderson overtaking Stevenson around week 6 from a Patriots fan, Dave.
I think I can see them being a split 1A, 1B from day one. I think, we're going to see Stevenson handle carries between the 20s. I think we're going to see him handle work in and around the goal line. But I think Henderson's going to have, a 40, 45% opportunity share role immediately. He's the best pass protecting back in 10 years. He's that good. He's electric with the ball in his hands. Yes, he tries to bounce to space too often, and he needs to just have his vegetables sometimes. But I think he could be phenomenal. But I think the Patriots are gonna struggle to keep him off the field given the options around.
I actually fear for Ramondre Stevenson. Not even on talent. But there are times where, and some of the reports that came out, he's a bit of a diva. He kind of has, he kicked off about his usage last year and the year before, and then he's been benched and he's kind of in and out for all these different reasons that are not always football related. And then Mike Vrabel is not going to suffer fools. Like, he's just not. If you're going to sit there and complain about your playing time or the number of snaps you're playing, Vrabel's just going to kick you to the curb. Like, he's not going to give two hoots about that. So I actually think, Ramondre Stevenson needs to see this as a real kick up the backside, and he's going to have to really embrace the fact that he's going to walk into a shared role, and he's going to have to prove that he is worthy of his touches, because I think Henderson could easily overtake him. But he's got to watch the attitude, because as soon as he starts sulking, he's going to foxtrot Oscar pretty quick. Family friendly show.
I've not heard that in a long, long time. Before we jump onto the wide receivers, Rich, any sleepers? I hate that term so much. Any sleeper names that you think should be kept an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, like how deep do you want to go? I guess is the sleeper question. I really like Woody Marks. I think he's a fantastic pass catching back. I think that's an intriguing landing spot. Jordan James, I think he's potentially got that kind of Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams quality of had a disappointing combine. I think he's got great vision, lands with the 49ers. We know Christian McCaffrey's not always healthy. I think he's an intriguing player. Devin Neal, I absolutely love as a prospect. I can't quite get my head around why he fell as far as he did on day 3. but lands with a fantastic spot in the Saints where, Alvin Kamara's locked up for another 2 years contractually, but he's getting a little bit older. So I'm not sure about that. And then, I see in the chat, we're talking about potentially Ollie Gordon. I'm not the biggest Ollie Gordon fan. I think there's some, he kind of comes in and out, shall we say. I think he's a bit hot and cold. But if you're talking round 4, round 5 dart throws, there's always worth that. And then if you want to go and take a dart throw on the Chiefs' latest receiver turned running back that can catch some passes, obviously you've got Brashard Smith as well, who I see the coaches are talking up today, having never actually seen him play in a Chiefs uniform yet. They're talking about him definitely going to see the field apparently as a rookie.
Yeah, Harry's complaining about Devin Neal's fall for his Devy team has absolutely fallen off. So, I agree with that. I think Taj Brooks, for me, that landing spot is so good. And I think it's so good for Chase Brown. Like, I think you're really going to get the best out of Chase Brown with having someone like Brooks behind him to help him out a little bit. I think sometimes people see running backs come in and think like, oh, what's that going to mean? And actually, sometimes you need people just to come and do some of the chump work, to come in and just free up for players to come and be a bit more electric. So you should never fear when you've got a top running back and they get someone who's clearly going to be like, not even the B, but maybe he works his way up to a B back, but he's just going to come and take some of those sort of in between the 20 stuff that's just going to free up Chase Brown to be even better. And I think this fit there works really, really well for Brooks. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he does. I think out of those sort of dart throwy kind of players, he's the one I'll probably be acquiring the most, I think, this off season.
Nice. Rush Nation, it's that time where I ask you to do me a favor. There is a small gaggle of people currently watching. If you could hit that like button, we would really, really appreciate it. If you could see that pop in to the comments. Right, wide receivers, Rich. We talked about Ted McMillan earlier on. Not the greatest landing spot. Anybody we haven't mentioned that you are a big fan of?
Well, let's start at the top with Travis Hunter, shall we? I've been saying for the past 3 months that if you could guarantee Travis Hunter played 100% of wide receiver snaps, he'd bomb my 101 over Ashton Genty. I think he's that good. I think he's transcendent. I think his contested catch ability combined with his route running and release package is truly rare. It's just that question mark of how much wide receiver is he going to play, which is why I've sort of knocked him down. But I think he's phenomenal. And then there's a whole list of guys that I like but don't love in terms of Emeka Egbuka. I absolutely love the player. I love the fit with the Bucks. It's just how much are we actually going to see him on the field? Unfortunately, I think his perfect scenario is Chris Godwin 2.0, and he's now got to sit behind Chris Godwin. And I'd be concerned for Chris Godwin if they're going to force him to play outside. So does that mean they're going to force Egbuka to play outside? I don't think that suits his game. So yeah, I'm concerned about the potential there. And then obviously you've got Jaden Higgins, who, it's funny because I comped Emeka Egbuka to Chris Godwin 2.0. I said Jaden Higgins was, his ceiling outcome was Nico Collins 2.0, and he lands on the same team as Nico Collins, the same as Egbuka did. So I think that could be really interesting, that offense with those two kind of big outside ball winners in Houston. So very interested in there as well.
Yeah, I think Egbuka is really interesting. I didn't expect it. I think the thing I would say is, and listening to Jason Light, is they obviously got so scared last season because they had 4 games with no Godwin and no Evans. And obviously they then lost all 4 of those games. And I think he felt he needed another big receiver for now and the future. I think we're getting to the point where we are in the twilight of the Mike Evans career. So I think that Egbuka is going to probably start outside, is where I would imagine he starts. But I imagine he'll probably start inside because I don't think Chris Godwin's nailed on to come back week 1. So I think there is an opportunity. He probably starts outside. I think he'll go outside. I think he's going to play a variety of different packages over the course of the season. It's just very interesting that now Jalen McMillan effectively falls off fantasy radars, because I can't see where Jalen McMillan is going to get work here. He'll get snaps, but to where he's going to be fantasy relevant anymore. Like, I can't see him being too far ahead of Ibuka to start, and I certainly don't think he's going to be ahead of him at the end. And I think that, the Bucks don't take first round wide receivers very often, and this GM has a history of pulling a lot of very good wide receivers out of the draft, and I think it's one of his more competent positions. So he's obviously seen something in there that he really wants for the next 5 years, and it's going to be interesting. But for Jalen McMillan, I think if you own Jalen McMillan, you'll be lucky to get anything from him at this rate, because I can't see him having any fantasy prominence for the next couple of years until either one of Godwin or Evans goes.
That makes me very sad.
Yeah,
Very
it does.
sad indeed.
Oh, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough, but that's the beauty of it. One player we've not talked about is Luther Burden. I'm keen to, because he's probably the most polarizing player in the fantasy community at wide receiver. What are your thoughts on him pre-draft, post-draft? Where are you now on Luther Burden?
So I think, I talked earlier about my riskometer and anything being from 0 to 10 in terms of potential outcomes. But Luther Burden is a 0 to 10 on the scale. I've joked, Bill Simmons has his Tyson zone where, he says that a person enters the Tyson zone when you believe anything that any story that comes out about them. To me, Luther Burden's in the fantasy Tyson zone where you could tell me he's absolutely phenomenal overall, 101 in fantasy formats. Like, he is a truly incredible athlete, such a smooth mover, such a, natural playmaker. But I could also see a world where he struggles to get targets on the Bears and, never produces, and he's just a gadget player as such. So, yeah, he's in at my wide receiver 5. He's in that tier with Ibuka and Higgins. And I kind of believe anything that anyone says could happen with him, because he's definitely a swing for the fences. You might struck out or you might send it over the fence.
Mm-hmm. I'm sort of the same. I actually thought a team would take him round 1. I thought he would go ahead of Golden. I thought he'd go ahead of Ibuka. I really think that it was a bit of a shock, but then he's fallen to the Bears with Ben Johnson. You think, wow, this could be really special. But as you say, there's now so many mouths to feed on that team that it could really be spectacular, or it could go to absolute nightmare. But I think you got to live in the hope of him. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Burden does, because I think he will be a fascinating player. I think for me, he's probably the most interesting because, again, that range of outcomes is absolutely massive. And I think there's a world, as you say, he could come out probably the best wide receiver in this draft. And there's a world where he could come out and he'll be out of the league in 3 years and could be playing in the XFL or Canada, and that wouldn't shock us either. But it's great. I mean, I love guys like that, because I think it just, I don't always like the cookie cutter guys. You like to have guys with that bit of risk, and if you're willing to pay out on it, you could hit the jackpot, but you've got to take a risk, and I think he is that guy.
There is a comment on the screen, Murph, but this is you again.
Yeah, there's a few. So Harry's asked, so as a prospect, where are you ranking Hunter against the current and future transcendent elites of Chase, JJ, Smith Jr., etc.?
Okay, so he against previous. So if we go back the last 6 classes, so since 2020, back to the rookie model. So these are the guys that are above the 95th percentile in those years. So we've got CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Travis Hunter, and Jamar Chase. So he's very much in that tier 1 of prospects. I'd probably have him below Neighbors, Chase, CeeDee Lamb as a prospect, but ahead of Devonta Smith, Justin Jefferson. In terms of future elites, Jeremiah Smith is maybe the best player I think I've ever seen in college. So yeah, I'm not sure where I'd rate him yet, but he'd probably be ahead of Travis Hunter.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have any more comments to put on the screen, Murph? Or
just that, Matthew Golden Green Bay Packers is a big fit, and it's liked. Surprised the Chiefs haven't picked up Isaiah Bond.
I don't think anybody's touching Isaiah Bond with potential legal issues. I think his NFL career is over before it even got started.
Which is a hard one, right? Because you have to accept the fact that obviously the charges against him are very serious, but they're charges. You know, he's not been found guilty in a court of law, and I'm not sitting here saying that he's did it or that he didn't do it. You know, we don't know. We weren't there. I understand why the league have passed on him. He screams like a candidate for the supplemental draft. I wouldn't write him out yet, only if those issues go away. He could be one of those players. Well, it happens every few years, doesn't it? You always get someone that sort of comes out of the supplement, like that goes into the supplemental draft that could make it interesting. I feel like that's the route he could go.
Well, I think the problem with Isaiah Bond is that he seems like a knucklehead, and coaches had issues with him. So I think that added with the sexual assault allegations are probably why. The supplemental draft he wouldn't be eligible for because he's declared for the draft. The supplemental draft is for players who don't declare in time for the draft. Something happens in college, whether that be a legal issue, whether that be an eligibility issue, something like that. And that's then a second supplemental draft that happens later in the year. He's a free agent. Anyone can go and pick him up. Anyone can go and sign him as a UDFA, give him, $5 to come and sign, or give him a free entry into a mini camp. But literally no team has done it. There's no cost to acquire Isaiah Bond now. They can go and pick him up for free. But I imagine what's going to happen is he'll sit out as a free agent. No one will touch him until this legal case gets resolved. If he is found innocent, then a team will absolutely pick him up. If he is found guilty, then as I said, that's probably his NFL career over before it started.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I forgot.
Sorry, Murph.
No,
we obviously mentioned that the wide receiver class wasn't brilliant. Tight ends, though, absolutely fantastic. Did you have Tyler Warren as your one before the draft, Rich?
No, I don't see it with Tyler Warren. I think he's good. I think he's great after the catch, but I think he's one of these theoretical players where I think as an inline blocking tight end, I think he's poor. I think he loses at the point of attack too often. I think his hand placement is poor. So we're saying he's a movable piece. He's a slot receiver, but I don't think he's a good enough route runner to consistently separate. I don't think he's, particularly with the Colts, who have got one of the better pure slot receivers in the league in Josh Downs. So, yeah, he's someone that I like. I think he's a good prospect, but I think where people are talking about and where people are ranking him, given basically his big skill is that he's really good with the ball in his hands. That's not really what I'm looking for from a tight end. So, no, I've always been a Colston Loveland guy. I think he's a prototypical tight end. And I've always had him above Warren. And then, the NFL agreeing with me and giving Loveland better draft capital than Warren just skyrocketed him a whole tier above Warren for me.
Okay. Where would you take him ideally in a rookie draft? Where have you got him?
Colston Loveland. So I've got Colston Loveland in a Superflex draft would be my 108, and Tyler Warren would be my 111.
Okay. Anybody else that you are a fan of tight end wise in this class?
How long have you got? There's loads that I love. Harold Fanning Jr. is one of the strangest athletes, one of the strangest movers I've ever seen on film. But he literally broke my rookie model. 3 of the metrics I use, he was 100th percentile in. It's ridiculous. How that college production can't translate to the NFL, I don't know. So yeah, love him. Mason Taylor, I was so excited to see him to the Jets. I've been talking about the Jets going after him for the last 2 months. So to get him in the second round, I'm absolutely delighted for. I think, he's probably not got the ceiling. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 4 tight end. But for him being potentially just that, plug and play, reliable back end tight end one for fantasy teams, I think he's got that. Terrence Ferguson, love the landing spot, love the kind of Tyler Higbee replacement, great athlete, and Sean McVay knows exactly what to do with stuff in terms of receiving talent. And I think he could be phenomenal. And then there's 2, I guess, kind of lottery tickets that I absolutely love, and maybe these guys are a bit too deep for Harry in terms of his question. But Elijah Arroyo with the Seahawks, I think, has got huge amounts of potential. And then Oronde Gadsden, who went on day 3 to the Chargers. So he's a former wide receiver, freak athlete. Again, unbelievable production in college. I don't know if he's going to be ready to see the field as a rookie. But in terms of matchup nightmare, could be that, receiver in a tight end's body, like sort of you think of Jimmy Graham and Darren Waller in terms of they didn't line up in line very often. They weren't winning any blocks at the point of attack, but as a receiver they were phenomenal.
I think this class was much needed at the tight end position for the NFL. I know we've had a couple of studs in the last few years. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta, right, which is great. It's always good when you're getting a bit of a replenishment at the top, because those top guys from a couple of years ago, the Travis Kelce's, are falling back sort of down to earth now. But if you look at the performances of like the tight ends, and I'll just do sort of half point PPR, right? Tight end 12 last year, I can't believe I'm going to say this, was Hunter Henry. Right, with 112 fantasy points in half point PPR. Like, we've got to eradicate this just falling over 100 points being tight end 1 performance over a season. Like, we have to get it to 10 points a game. And I think this class, you're bringing in people that are going to raise the floor of the position. I don't think there's going to be too many that are going to raise the ceiling. But I think the floor in particular, bringing in some quality tight ends, was much, much needed, because, I think it was a couple of years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were looking at under 100 points was tight end 1 performance. I might be wrong. I'm sort of, it's in my head. I'll go look at it in a second. But, we can't be having those situations where, like barely 100 points is getting into the top position. So it's good to see this welcome talent coming in. Into the league for sure.
I sort of steered us unknowingly to the end of the positions. Is there any players, Rich or Murph, that we haven't talked about that you would like to mention today?
Cole Williams of the Patriots, I think, is phenomenal route runner, does so much. I love him with Drake May. I think he could be an absolute superstar. And you're going to get some decent value if you can grab him at a sort of mid to back end of the second rounds. I've seen him go in 3rd round of some rookie drafts. I think he could be phenomenal.
Yeah, I like it. I like Pat Bryant as well. I just think there's just something about him. And again, going to the Broncos, it's interesting enough for me to take a punt and a flyer on him. I think he's got a lot of attributes, and there really isn't a clear consensus number 2 behind Courtland Sutton. And I think that if Pat Bryant can hit the ground running and do the work and earn some targets early, then I think you could see him really sort of establish himself. And I kind of like where he can get to. So he's one for me. And I think for me, there's quite a few running backs here, and sort of Rich mentioned a few here that I don't know how, maybe Rich will refute me here. I sort of think if you're playing in those leagues where you've got the 6-round rookie drafts or 5-round rookie drafts, those later rounds, I tend to really ignore wide receiver past sort of round 3, maybe top of 4th if one of those guys has kind of fallen, and I'll just take stock running backs, because I just think you're more likely to hit and find. So I think get really comfortable with the running back position and just stop trying to take a flyer on at wide receiver in your 5th round of your rookie draft, because it feels like a waste of pick, unless someone's like magically fallen, or you want to take the punt or Bond gets found innocent, but then you can probably pick him up for free. I don't know what you think, Rich. That's kind of advice I'd be palming out to people for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. My general rule of thumb is I don't want to draft wide receivers that go on day 3. Yes, I know we've had a few hits in terms of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Puka Nacua in recent years, but I think I'm happy to let people chase that. You're talking about it's like 2.5% chance that you get a top 24 wide receiver from a guy that's drafted after day 2. So yeah, give me day 1, day 2 wide receivers, And then after that point, I'm just attacking volume-based positions. So to me, that's running back, quarterback. It's a guy that, with my 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks, I'm not looking for a guy that's going to be a long-term starter for me. I'm hoping to basically turn those into 2nd round picks the next year. So if I can get a guy like, I don't know, Devin Neal or Jordan James or Taj Brooks that maybe starts for a week, 2, they get, they flash once, they have 1 week where they put up 2 touchdowns and score, 20 points or something. Great. I can sell them for a future 2nd round pick. Boom. I've turned a 3rd, 4th round pick into a 2nd, and I'm happy and I'm moving forward. And then I can actually get something with that 2nd round pick the next year. I'm not taking dart throws and thinking that I'm good enough to identify the next Puka Nacua.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of us think that, and I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think it's, it goes back to what you said at the top of the show. This is a good draft class. This is the great draft class. If you can find someone that is in love with a late round prospect, I'm all for flipping those picks. Unless you've got someone there, and I'll take equal capital next year. I think next year's class is deeper. Don't be afraid. You don't have to take someone. You can flip the pick. I'm sure someone will bite you a 2025 or 2025 fifth or a 2026 fourth. And, if someone's in love with a player and there's something there, put the feelers out in your draft, be active. Don't be afraid to punt into next year, where I think it is deeper. I think there'll be a lot more interesting players there that you can take.
Or punt it to 2027. I think that's 2027 is going to be genuinely incredible. I think we've got 2 wide receivers who are going to break fantasy, quite frankly. I think Arch Manning's probably going to come out in 2027. I think there's going to be a few quarterbacks in that class. We've got DJ Lagway, people like that. I think 2027 is going to be a special rookie class. So if you can, get a 2nd round pick a couple of years down the road, I think it could prove very sensible.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. I think there's so many fun things to look forward to. None of which is also more important than perhaps something that you're doing this summer, Rich, with the Fantasy Sanctuary lot. Do you want to tell some of the crew listening now what you've got planned for a special day that you've got with your members? And, a way to shout that out.
We're doing a members get together. You've put me on the spot there, Matt. I can't even remember what day the week month is. At some point in Manchester. Come. We're going to do some live drafts. Me, Tom, Tyler's flying over from Texas to come and join us. We've got some live drafts, drinking, food, just hanging out, hopefully having some good fun. So we've got it. I believe it's our pinned tweet on the Twitter page. But come join with us, come draft, have fun. It's a really good day, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's sort of. Is it the 20th of June? Does that sound?
It's mid-June. I can't remember exactly what date, but it's definitely mid-June. It's in Manchester at the Brotherhood pub. There you go. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's 21st June. And the only reason why is because I know I can't make it because birthday celebrations and things getting lagged with family and stuff. So the cousins doing GCSE, or the nephew and niece doing GCSEs, A levels and stuff. So I've had my whole June is taken up with birthday stuff because it's a big one for me this year. Otherwise, I would have loved to have been there. But definitely join the Fantasy Sanctuary. Sign up to them. Tom, Rich, the rest of the business. They've got so much content on their channel. Is there anything else you want to plug other than the rookie guide, the meetup?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, come join us. Come find us. Have fun. If you joined as a member, make sure you're jumping in Discord because that's where most of the content gets shared. That's where most of the conversations happen. So it's always a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been too long. We won't make it as long until you come back. We'll have to get you on before the end, start of the season, and talk a bit more about redraft and pick that mind of yours and see where you've got these rookies. And once you've had a bit of time to sort of see some preseason and workouts and see where you're at with coming into the season.
No, so thank you ever so much for having me on, boys. It's always a pleasure, and always feels like coming home whenever I get to come and have a chat with you both.
Very kind, Rich. Very kind. It is. It's great to have you back, and definitely going to have you back on again. I mean, Ashton Genty 102. Let's do it. Why not? It's. I'm joking. obviously. Rush Nation, that is going to do it for this week's show. Please do head over and check out Rich's guide. It's going to be fantastic. Rush Nation, it's time for Murph to do his little dance. Until next week, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.